Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be talking live with the executive producers and co-creators of the animated series Lost in Oz, Jared Mark and Mark Warshaw. Do you guys confuse people with your names being very similar?
Kind of all the time.
All the time.
And we're just,
There's four of us who created the show and are partners, and 3 out of the 4 of us have Mark in our name. So you have a good shot. If you want to address us in a meeting, just say Mark, and it's almost a catch-all.
Wonderful. Okay, I have a lot of questions for you both, so let's get right to it. You released a brand new Lost in Oz short film last Friday. Can you tell me about the short? And Jared, I'll throw this one to you first.
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you for having us here. We're thrilled to be talking to you and talking to all of you watching. Yes, so Lost in Oz, Packing Magic is our brand new short film. It is picking up right where the Lost in Oz series left off. So for those of you who don't know, Lost in Oz, the series, there are 2 seasons currently on Amazon Prime Video, and it is a modern, new story picking up on the classic Wizard of Oz story, the incredible Oz books, the 14 original books, has given us this wonderful source material to tell this story from. And so now the series is a serialized story. Every episode picks up right where the last one left off, and we left the series on this great cliffhanger, not knowing what's going to happen next. And so this short picks that baton up and keeps running with our story and takes us into the next chapter of Lost in Oz.
Wonderful. Thank you. So for someone who's never seen Lost in Oz, how's it different from the classic story?
So this is a modern retelling, and it's actually, it's not just a retelling, it's actually a continuation of that story. Our Dorothy Gale is actually the great-granddaughter of the original Dorothy Gale. Our West the Witch is the great-granddaughter of the Wicked Witch of the West. So there's a continuation where we've taken the original 14 books from L. Frank Baum that Jared mentioned earlier, and we fast forward a couple generations to a brand new Emerald City. What would Oz and Emerald City look like in today's world? It's a quite modern place, and that's our version of Oz, and because of that sort of combination of people migrating to Oz and the world growing, we have just a giant kind of reimagining place of Emerald City.
Yeah, I love it. And for anyone who hasn't watched Lost in Oz, I recommend it. I was watching it the other day with my 5-year-old, and she was like glued to the screen. And it's a really cool entry point into the Oz story because it's modern and it's magical and it's futuristic, but it's also very relatable to the time we're in now. So very, very cool series to watch, and also something you watch with the whole family. So I want to talk about your plans for the series and where you might take us next. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Where did you get the idea for Lost in Oz, this retelling of the novels?
So we were always fans of the Oz stories. We're big fans of telling stories over various media platforms. And L. Frank Baum was one of the original, what people like to call transmedia storytellers. He wrote the books. He had stage plays. He started one of the very first movie studios in Hollywood, actually, to tell more Oz tales. And so because we're people that enjoy that kind of storytelling, where you take one tale and migrate it over various platforms like movies or comic books or TV shows or into toys, we always had our eye on Oz. And we were fortunate enough that one of our former employees actually started working at Amazon, and she called us up one day and said Amazon's really looking to create Oz, an Oz show for children. And I know how much you guys love that and want to do something like that. It was really just, that sort of old definition of luck, which was preparation running into opportunity. We were really ready to tell an Oz story. And so when that call came, we just sort of locked the doors, threw away the cell phones for a couple of weeks, and just collected all our thoughts and pitched the tale. And we really wanted to tell a story about home. We wanted to tell a story where Dorothy Gale and the Wicked Witch of the West, their great grandchildren were together, and that created a wonderful, fun conflict. And we just had a ball telling the story. It's really one of the greatest gifts, I think, for our careers to be able to. It's an honor to take an American classic fairy tale. I think you said the other day the Library of Congress called it like the American fairy tale, and to give it our own spin and to put into it the things that we love about storytelling into this tale has been just a really great time for us.
So your love for Oz was so deep that people in your circles knew this about you. So that when the opportunity arose, they knew who to call.
Absolutely. And I think it's something that's deep in all of us. I mean, it's become, the story of Oz has just become so ingrained in our culture. It's like in the fabric of pop culture and our shared culture, I think worldwide, certainly in America, and we're finding all over the world. People really know and respond well to this story. And as Mark said, what a great honor it is to sort of create this new entry point for a generation of kids and families that might not be as familiar with those original books. And if this series can help kids, find those books, pick them up, and dive into that story, I mean, what a joy that would be.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. My daughter is 5 and has never seen or, read. She's just now learning how to read. She hasn't experienced the story in the ways that I have, and yet she knows about the Yellow Brick Road and she knows about No Place Like Home. It is just so woven into our culture and our language even, that it's maybe one of the most powerful stories that we have. So I know what I love about Lost in Oz, but what do you guys hear from the fans? Why do they love this show?
I think much of what you were just saying seems to be a common resonating theme throughout the comments that we get and the discussions we get. And we intended this show to be something that the whole family could sit down and watch together. We all 4 of the creators of the show have young kids and had little kids when we first started making this show. And it was something important to us that we didn't ever want to make a show that parents would just put their kids in front of the TV and walk away. We didn't want to make a babysitter, and we certainly didn't want to make a parent Punisher, one of these shows that kind of makes you want to pull your hair out. We wanted something much like the best of TV that we experienced growing up, watching it with our families. We wanted to create something that we could have every member of a family sit down and really enjoy together and dig into together and maybe even binge watch together. And that, when we first started making this show, we were pulling from these references like, and it sounds crazy to say this, but things like The Wire and Breaking Bad and
Game of Thrones was a huge inspiration for us. Yes.
Yeah, these and to say, well, how does that work into a kid show? The way it works in is we set out to tell a serialized story where every episode picks up where the last one left off in a big sprawling world that every episode gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And those who we think are the adversaries who might seem like the big bad adversary in episode 1 or 2 ends up becoming a kind of a lower rung adversary on the ladder up those battles. And how those worlds, how those characters all evolve and expand was something that we really took a lot of inspiration from the serialized sort of premium TV that we were all watching at the time, and thinking, how do we do that for the whole family? How do we do something that gets you that invested, that into what happens next, that edge of your seat kind of TV watching? How do we do that for 5-year-olds? How do we do that for 8-year-olds? And how do we make the 14-year-old older sister and the 7-year-old grandma all enjoy that same show together? And so that was really the goal. And we're thrilled to say that tends to be the comments we get back, that seems to be working.
It's definitely a co-viewing show. But we get that all the time. We especially get it where the younger child in the family might watch it, and the teenage brother or sister walking in the background catches their eye. And typically it's the design that really catches their eye. When we originally started planning the show, we wanted to make it as close to a feature film look and feel as we could, like a bingeable Pixar film. How close could we get to that with the budgetary constraints that we had? And we really wanted to make it feel. We were really attracted by stop motion animation. We actually at the beginning tried to make this a stop mo project, but it was our scope was just too large. So we set out to see how close we could get it to look like that. So there was a tangibility to it. We wanted to see the hand of the artist in really all the models that were sculpted, and that seems to really draw people in as well. Just the look and the feel, really big part of it. But the storytelling too. It's all about the characters. We're gonna give them a drive to get home, which is relatable to a lot of people. And the other thing that happens with this show is because it's Oz, it's a 122-year-old IP. This book came out in 1900, the original one. So every generation of the family has a different kind of relationship to this show. So oftentimes a grandparent is the one that turns on our show because they know Oz. And so at times we have 3 generations watching it together. And that's just sort of the dream come true for us.
I love that. So Mark, you mentioned this. The Library of Congress calls The Wonderful Wizard of Oz America's greatest and best loved homegrown fairy tale. Which sounds like very big boots to fill. So was this intimidating to you, or did you ever have moments where you thought, how are we going to pull this off?
That's a good question. It's funny. I remember when we were early days, we were meeting with like the production teams at Amazon, who is the original producer of the series. And they asked us that same question. And I think we frankly weren't allowing that to come into our heads when we were doing this. Instead, it was, 5 to 6 storytellers who love telling stories together in a room and just focusing on that. How do we tell a great story together and not let that sort of the big boots to fill jump in? Just this is what we like to do. Jared and I and our other 2 partners who created the series, Darren Mark and Abram McCalca, we've been telling stories for a long, long time together. So this is just something we love to do. This is like playing for us. We get paid to play. And so by sticking in that zone, it didn't feel too intimidating. We just knew what we wanted to do, and we told the best story we could. And we're really pleased that it worked out the way it did.
I will say one thing that we did keep in mind was how beloved these stories are to their like true fandom. Yeah. And it was something that was really important to us, that we, rather than being like nervous about it or intimidated by it, it was a really exciting challenge to take something that is so beloved and so well known and think, okay, well, a lot of what we talk about whenever taking on a new project is why are we telling this now? Why does this story need to be retold? Why does a 122-year-old story need to be retold today? And it's because it has to be relevant. It has to continue to speak to today's world and today's audiences. And so really digging into what is it about that original story that resonates? What is it that is so timeless? What is it that continues to touch families who pick up those books? And on top of that, what about that tone of those original stories continues to work and continues to capture the imaginations of kids picking up these stories? And so that was something that was really fun and challenging, was how do we take 14 original public domain beloved stories, digest them, know them, get them under our fingernails and in our blood, and then give ourselves the freedom to really kind of put those aside, knowing that we have those ingrained in us, knowing that we've got that tone, we've got that sensibility, and we're making a solemn oath to honor that and to kind of protect that sensibility and that tone, and then free ourselves up to, as we say, take that canon of books and launch out of that canon into play on word, but to really let ourselves go free and trust that we have all that ingrained and that we can to innovate off of that while still keeping that core sort of DNA that makes it feel like an Oz story intact.
Yeah, for sure. We're kind of in like a nostalgia era right now. And I feel very lucky because all the Disney movies that I loved from a kid are being remade, and now I can re-experience them with my daughter in kind of the remake world. And I know that's got to be a challenge because some people don't like any deviation from the original, and some people like a whole new retelling. So how do you guys walk that line, or what's your approach to retelling a classic?
Yeah, I mean, let's jump in together. It's really about honoring it. What's the best of that? What's the parts that really speak to us? Also, we took the temperature of the fandom as well. That's not something that we took lightly at all. This is a huge fandom for Oz that's been around for many years, and that really matters. And just really respecting what those books, the stories they told. As long as we did that, we were in, I think, a really, really good shape.
Yeah, a big part of what we did was and Mark referred to this earlier, is that we didn't want to think of this series as a wiping of the slate and a restart. Mm-hmm. Rather, we were really thinking like, okay, what if we, while still being a little bit loose and not ever precious with that source material, we wanted to say, what if all that story from those books 100 years ago actually happened? That's the history of this world. That's the history of Emerald City. That's what happened. And so 100 years ago, Dorothy's house landed in a pastoral Munchkin farmland, and she made her trek all the way, down the Elbrook Road to the Emerald City. That happened. Now, 100 years later, we can imagine that where that house landed, well, 100 years of urban development has happened in that Oz. And so now there is an airport built up around that site. It's no longer pastoral farmland. It has been modernized. There's fast food restaurants and there's subway lines that take you down the yellow brick line now. And that old city, Emerald City, that was off in the horizon in that book, is now our bustling metropolitan city center. And there has been a century of development that is literally built up all around it. And so when we were designing the show, it was so much fun to work with Stephen Donnelly, our art director, and his incredible team of people, artists in Scotland and all over the world, who helped us envision what it would be like. Okay, if that's the original architecture, that's the original city center. Well, over the last 100 years, these buildings have grown up all around it. And if you look at those designs, literally, you'll see these sort of stratified architecture. You'll see the way that we tried to hold on at the bottom level to those original drawings and those original illustrations and pulling inspiration from all of that. And yet we're building on top of it and building on top of it. And so that simple little design idea really, I think, was part of every detail of the show. Was how do we take what exists? How do we take what's there? It's a given, it's fact, it's history, and how do we build on top of that all around it so that it feels organic, it feels lived in, and it feels like it's truly an extension of what's come before.
We've also added characters that were in there that are immortal. So we know that Glinda the Good and the Scarecrow, they're immortal characters. So they were there at the beginning. They were there during the time of those books. So they're also bridging characters. So when we design a show, we're really thinking about what kind of, basically elements we can add to the mix to allow our storytelling to be as broad as it can be. Because what we really did when we set out to tell this story was not to make just 26 episodes of the show. We had a big plan, and we know we actually planned out 5 seasons of this series. So there's a lot of story that we wanted to tell. So we put a lot of these elements in there to give us that maximum flexibility that when we get into the writer's room and we're sitting down to really tell a story, that we've got these devices that can help us generate even more tales.
So it's a big story. You've got a big arc in your minds. And there were 2 seasons of Lost in Oz on Amazon Prime that you can still go stream today. And the series won 3 Daytime Emmy Awards. So you decide you're not done yet. There's much more story to tell. And the next chapter, which we showed a clip of at the beginning of the live stream, is the Lost in Oz short. So when you decide to continue the Lost in Oz story, where do you begin? What was your creative development process like?
So you're talking about retelling it? I mean, going on from here?
Yeah, after we ended at the end of season 2 on Amazon Prime, and then heading forward.
So we, when the show stopped at that point, we had already been developing and writing. We had already written the next 3 scripts. There were business issues, I would say, on the Amazon side where they stopped making kids and family shows for a little while. So we stopped making the show then, but we had already built out and designed the whole next chapter of this of the tale. And like I said, we also knew where we ultimately wanted to go. When we tell stories, we like to figure out like where's the end point, and then do this reverse pyramid. So we know where we're ultimately taking Dorothy and West and Ojo and our team. We knew that kind of from the beginning. And so we've just been building towards that all the way. And so we had already written the next 3 scripts for the next chapter. And so when we started working on this short, we were just identified what's the best place to really launch in a short little teaser. So we can then propel ourselves into the next chapters, which will be in a feature film. And also over various platforms that we're telling stories on now. So we're in development on, in children's books. We're developing out potential comic book series. So there's a lot of places where we want to put story for this. And like I said, we had it pretty much mapped out, so we know where it goes from here.
And it also makes it really helpful that the series, the last chapter of the series, ended on this cliffhanger where our audience is just hanging on what happens next. And so in all those discussions that we had, how do we turn those scripts that we have into the short to launch us into the next part of the story? It feels like, well, let's answer that cliffhanger and launch into the future.
And we're introducing a massive new character in the short who's going to be Dorothy's big antagonist moving forward. So we knew that was coming. We always knew that character was coming. You got to watch the short to find out who it is. And so we didn't want to create this short and launch ourselves into the next chapter without introducing that character. And that's where we built around that in a lot of ways too.
So you guys get the cast and crew back together to launch into the next chapters of Lost in Oz, and you actually used Bluescape during the pre-production of the short. So can you guys just tell me what that was like? Sure.
So beautiful to get to the opportunity to kind of work with you, the whole team at Bluescape, really. And when Dave Kung first approached us to do this part of the project with you guys, it took this beautiful moment of kind of recognizing what the technology's power could be, and we just dove in. We dove in, and we're coming out of the COVID time where we were all virtual anyway. Lost in Oz in the production of the TV series was a very virtual production anyway. We ran mission control out of East Hollywood, call it our secret headquarters out of East Hollywood, but the teams were all over the world. So Jared was talking about Stephen Donnelly, who was our art director. He was part of the company Flaunt Axis, who were in Scotland. So they helped us design that whole series, all the characters, all the world. They were the lead design team on that, and they're based in Scotland. We had a storyboard team with us in East Hollywood, but we also had one at Atomic Cartoons up in Vancouver. And then we had our animation, our core animation studio, which is Polygon Pictures. They're in Japan, in Tokyo, Japan. And they also have various teams that were in Malaysia and India who are also working on the animation. So we already were a virtual production. And when we got introduced to this technology with Bluescape, we quickly realized that, you know, the first step in animation is that really design process once you have the story down. And so we had a new storyboard team. We had to ramp them up really quickly. We already had a lot of great pre-existing designs, but we needed them to know what the characters look like, what Dorothy's bedroom looks like, what the smart balls look like, all the elements that are going to be in this short. We need them to know what that looks like quickly. And a lot of times, if you're not in the same room, you're not in the same office together, that's a lot of emails back and forth. Let me send you a link, you know, to a box, you know, folder. That's typically how we would have done that. But to be able to be in Bluescape, which put us all in the same virtual space together, and we put up all the elements we need. We had our script up there. We had all the design references we could possibly need. And then other elements that might be new, we could pull in new good reference imagery that hadn't been previously designed and put it in the space. Meet with the teams all around the world that were working on this particular short and be in the same space together. And it just was more rapid the way it worked. Even when you're in the same space, a lot of times you're still pulling things up from various, you know, we're all in front of the screen and we're pulling something up from our server or what have you. But to have it all in one space, in our Bluespace workspace for the Packing Magic short, we just saw that the conversation flowed so quickly. We just cut down time, really. The time and production process and the words we had to say, you know, it just, we could point, we can annotate. And it really, I think, got our teams up and revved really quickly. And then when we took that transition point where we took the storyboards, once we locked our storyboards and handed it off to the Polygon team to start the animation, that too it's a really nice moment to hand off, because we could catch them up visually in a really wonderful way. There's always a little bit of a language barrier when you're jumping over to Tokyo from, you know, Burbank and Hollywood. And that, I think that cut down the time too. And so it's just efficiencies. And when you're producing a show, you're looking for efficiencies. And I really felt like the Bluescape tool just, it helps in that pre-production process to get your teams all on the same page fast. And we're finding that, you know, we started it with this Packing Magic short, but we are now using it across all of our projects. We have 11 other projects in development in various stages. And we now use Bluescape for all of them, whether it's a graphic novel that we're doing or a feature film that we're working on. We're really using this to get those teams up and ramped and ready to go.
I love what you said about the number of words you have to use, because I find myself doing the same thing, where I'll be describing an idea or concept that I have in my head. And then I realize, oh, wait, I can just show you. I can just go to Bluescape and show you. And it's different than screen sharing in a lot of ways. So I encourage anybody listening who hasn't checked out Bluescape, go check it out and, you know, see what it can do for you.
Absolutely. It was so helpful, and especially in this truly visual medium, to just be able to, with a team on the other side of the world, to be sharing this, you know, sharing our screen, but it's more than just sharing the screen, because you're sharing your whole workspace, as well as these windows like we're talking in now. And so we have all of that on one screen together, and we can literally go to a specific frame and discuss it. We're all circling the same thing. We're seeing the same issue at hand, and we're problem solving together. And to be able to do that in real time, looking at the same asset that we're all talking about, is just so much smoother, more efficient, more economical than describing it. Go to this time code at this frame, and then you take a look. Here's my notes. You write your notes. Now someone has to synthesize our notes. It's like, let's just have a conversation. Let's just be in the same room and talk about it. And it's so much easier.
Sorry, Gerald, my bad.
No, smoother and honestly more fun.
Yeah, and also great for after the meeting, right? So that your team, like the storyboard team or the animation team, whichever team you're handing off to, sound, we did it with our sound teams as well. They've got that reference that they can go back to. They can go back to the workspace after the meeting. The notes are all there. They already saw that reference point and they have that access to that. And I think that was super helpful as well.
I've got a couple comments here. Freddie says our whole family enjoys the show. Thank you. So I just wanted to share that with you both. And then
Thanks,
I have
Freddie.
a question. I have a question here from Thiago. I apologize if I
Thiago.
mispronounced your name. Thiago. So 5 years after the second season, how are you going to reactivate the fan base, which today is 5 years older?
It's a great question. Not surprising it's coming from somebody like Thiago. And it's a wonderful challenge. And we've always looked at Oz a lot of sort of the same way. I think there's a term sometimes used about the Pottering effect, how Harry Potter books kind of aged up as they went along. And we certainly are keeping that in mind for the evolution of the Oz story. So once we jump into the next bigger animated chapters of this tale, it will grow with our audience. The storytelling is going to get more complex. The drama is going to heighten. The stakes are certainly going to heighten. But at the same time, we don't want to also exclude the younger children coming in, because we know, and we're really fortunate that even though the books were like, a huge success over 122 years ago, and then you had obviously the movie everyone knows so well that came out in 1939. You have Wicked, which is like the #2 most watched musical, Broadway musical of all time. There's been these moments where Oz has jumped and carried on that next generation, but we're in this really fortunate moment, and we don't want to we don't want to leave those kids behind. There's a whole generation of children out there that Lost in Oz, this is their first exposure to this world and this story. And so we want to continue to invite more young kids into that. So we definitely keep that in mind when we tell this tale. But we also know, as Thiago said, there's kids are 5 years older. We've got kids who watched this when they were, between 6 and 11 years old, and now they're teenagers. So what are we going to do to enhance that? We're going to talk to those kids also in different platforms where we can actually age up a little bit more. But in the big mothership, which we call, our big animated pieces like the films and obviously the series, that's going to always be a co-viewing experience for everybody. So we still back to the grandparent should enjoy it, the parent should enjoy it, the older kid in the house is going to enjoy it hopefully, and then all the way down about 5, where your daughter is, Brianna. And I think that's the starting point for us.
So you mentioned a film, and the short also teases Lost in Oz, the movie. So Mark, what can you tell me about what's coming next?
So like I've said a couple times, we've been planning a big story for a really long time, and we can't wait to tell more. It's a story that just needs to be told. And so if you watch the short, you'll see who the giant big bad is that's coming for Dorothy and Emerald City. And Dorothy and her friends are going to have to, basically pull the team together to save Emerald City, and then some. And so we have that, and then we'll also have, which is unique, and if you watch the short, there's a link to it, but you could also go now to passporttooz.com. And you can sign up for updates. So what we've been doing is really looking at the Web3 space and what that means for entertainment franchises moving forward. Web3 is offering just a beautiful array of various tools to connect creators and storytellers and with their fan base. And it allows the fans to come in and be much more part of the franchise and actually participate in it. And so we're creating much more of a direct relationship moving forward. So we're working on a lot of next generation sort of storytelling tools. Like just yesterday, I was on with the team that's creating an artificially intelligent Dorothy Gale. And what does that mean? Like it almost sounds scary in a way. And that's part of why we're doing it, because we want to understand this technology and see if it's going to be okay for kids. Because like Jared and I said, we're all parents. We care deeply. And you can't stop the metaverse from coming. You can't stop artificially intelligent characters from coming. They're coming anyway. So we want to learn from them, make the best possible, most nutritious versions that we can. And what we're finding is that they're unlocking a whole new level of storytelling possibilities. Just yesterday, the meeting I was in to talk about the capabilities of what we can do with an artificially intelligent character and how that character can be sitting there and talking to our audience and, actually creating a deeper connection and bond with the audience and influencing where our story goes from there. So in the past, I've worked on shows where we were early days working with the internet and early days working with the conversation and the back and forth with fans. And we were able to ingest that, and fans would ultimately see that on the screen. I think what this is going to allow us to do is really create a franchise that's in a way a living, breathing organism where we're working together with our fan base and they're working with our storytelling team to create something that is shared really with everybody.
I'm not surprised to hear you say that, because years ago, didn't you guys do sort of a choose your own adventure sort of avenue with Lost in Oz? And that was when that was at its beginning stages, that type of storytelling.
Yeah,
we did do that.
Yeah, Jared, I mean, that was a massive project.
It was so much fun. We did a choose your own adventure style audio game on the Amazon Alexa device, and it was this really exciting audio gameplay. It sort of mixed podcast and radio play with our show and that choose your own adventure style of storytelling. And so you could be listening to a story, and it'd be this branching narrative where, at a moment you have a choice does Dorothy and West do they go upstairs into this conflict, or do they go downstairs into this conflict? And we ended up having, I think, about 90 minutes total of gameplay. So you could go through that, but about a 20-minute actual story. So you could go through a number of ways and come back to the beginning and start again. Just so much fun. We geek out on new storytelling
toys.
Yeah. We just like toys and figuring out how to use them to have some fun, tell stories, and as Mark was saying, really connect with the audiences, because that's the best part.
That's very cool. Okay, I have one last question for you both. And we asked this question of the audience a little bit earlier. So anyone listening in, tell us your favorite Oz character in the comments. Jared, I'll start with you. Who is your favorite character in the Oz universe?
Oh my gosh. There's so many. Oh, it's like picking children.
You can't answer that.
I immediately, they're rifling through my head, but I think it's like I love Ray, I love the Scarecrow, I all of them, but I think I come back to, and Toto aside, because Toto doesn't count. He's too lovable. He's too it doesn't count. I think my favorite is West. I come back to West. To me, she is such a cool character, both in design and in just who she is at her core, at her magical core. And she's complicated. She's got all this great internal conflict. She is driven and ambitious in a way that I really love. As this cool kid, we always talk about her, rather than being this magically maniacal person. She's not. She's more akin to like an incredibly talented kid athlete or kid violinist who just has this natural talent and incredible ambition. And everyone around her knows, oh, she could change the world. Like, she could do something really special. And to see what this young 12-year-old kid is going to do with all this raw ability. And to me, that's such a good story. I love her.
That's a beautiful description of her. And I tend to also really like the complicated characters in a story. So great answer. Mark, who is your favorite character in the Oz universe?
So hard. It is like picking children. I have like we say we're playing toys. This is Fitz, who's like our internet fan favorite. We're making a 3D printed toy right now. So he's sitting in front of me saying, I'm your favorite. I can hear this.
Pick me.
Telling me like, yeah, I am your favorite. I am, because he's hilarious. We had so many great actors. I think that was one of the best parts of diving, because we all came from live action, actually. And so Lost in Oz was one of our first animated things we all did together. And to get in the booth, Jared's our voice director, along with Sue Blue, who's a legend in the industry, and work with all these great actors. So like Nika Futterman, who plays West. This is, the talent is off the charts, and they brought so much extra to the characters when they come into the booth. We think of Ashley Betcher, who plays Dorothy, who is Dorothy. If you've seen her online, she basically looks like Dorothy. It's hard to tell where Dorothy starts and Ashley takes over. But I also like we're talking about our complicated characters. I like our villains that come from Oz. General Guff was a great character in the books that we found kind of deeper in some of the books that we brought in to Lost in Oz season 2, and was just a really fantastic character to play with. I love Scarecrow too. Stephen Stanton, who plays our Scarecrow, is kind of an off the charts, amazing talent. He's a voice everyone who's ever watched an animated anything has heard probably dozens and dozens of times. And I just love the way that he's got this sort of caring, loving relationship where Dorothy's there without parents, and he almost fills the grandparent sort of role in that. And I love how that helps kind of bridge our generations too. I'm being very political in my answer because I kind of love them all. And I think Ojo too has been such a fun character. Jorge Diaz, who played our Ojo, brought a lot of humor to that role, and is one of those places where we had more room to play, where that people aren't as familiar with Ojo. So Jorge was able to make that character his own in a beautiful way. And then Ray he's our comic relief. Like, he's just our conspiracy realist, as we like to say. So there's just a lot of fun that we get to have with him too.
I believe you when you say it's like picking children. So I know it was a tough question, but I really enjoyed talking to both of you. Thank you so much, Jared. Thank you, Mark, for being on the live stream with us today. Real quick before we end, our partners at Wacom are having a big Black Friday sale. So I want to let everyone know, if you're in the market for a new Wacom One, you can get it for $150 tomorrow through November 28th. So we'll share a link in the comments so that you guys can go grab one of those if you're interested. And thank you to everyone watching. Thank you again, Mark and Jared. This was a really great conversation.
Thank you so much, Brianna, and everybody watching, and everyone who's watching Lost in Oz and Packing Magic. We appreciate you all so much, truly.
Yes, thank you so much.
For sure. Bye, everyone.